Hey, this is Rebecca Dirks for PremierGuitar.com. We are here at Orange Amps at Winter NAMM 2013 with Doug Doppler. And Orange has brought a whole new technology to the show. It's why don't you just tell us the story behind it?
Okay. Orange, I think, like players, at the heart of what we do, we're not a company that goes like, hey, what product can we sell people this year? You know, we are effectively a company run by creatives for creatives. You know, as players, I think we love the idea of sitting with our gear until something wonderful happens in that creative space. And as a company, thanks to people like you, thanks to magazines like Premier Guitar, we've been afforded the opportunity to design out of a space of success, which means that we don't have to do things to pay the rent. We get to do things that are innovative because we're excited about it. All right, so a valve tester, what's the big deal? Well, you know, Premier Guitar, what's neat is that there's a range of readers. Some of whom are absolute total tube fanatics. They're going, oh, what type of tube is that? You know, and I mean brand, not what model. And you know, there are other people who are just like, I own a tube amp because I really like the way it sounds. I don't need to know any more than that. I enjoy playing it, and that's totally cool. The difference is all this crazy stuff back here. I want to tell you a story. Let me tell you a story. About 30 years ago, and this is the 30th anniversary Tube Screamer, Ivan has had the really good idea to basically create a pedal, and this is the original issue Tube Screamer, and they decided, hey, you know, we need to create a pedal that allows you to get at a reasonable volume what happens in a non-master volume tube amp at ear-deafening volume. We need to do that, and they had tremendous success with that. So basically, the Tube Screamer imitates power amp distortion, basically created by the power tube part of that circuit. Right around the same time, the Boss guys kind of went, hey, you know, we want to be able to kind of get that preamp type of distortion. So basically, this right here is kind of the Eve pedal, if you will. And so again, thinking that 30 years ago, if you were actually walking into music stores 30 years ago, which I was, dinosaurs were not roaming the earth at that point. But
I wasn't.
Thank you, I feel better now. Some of you guys, you know what I'm talking about. You would go into the store and there weren't a lot of amps to choose from. And in particular, at that time, Mesa Boogie was not distributed publicly. You had to buy from the factory, and they really were the company that really were the front runners in terms of multi-gain stages in an amplifier. And so what players basically had no choice but to do was to start using drives or multiple drives to try and emulate that tone. So basically, by necessity, we started using these pedals. And you know, I don't know, some people might call it pedal crack. You know, we kind of got hooked on it, and we learned how to make it work. And that's the best thing, is like, we're like, hey, I know how to use this pedal. Now, interestingly enough, this is the vintage and for all the pedal geeks out there, yeah, you know what it is. As opposed to this guy, you know what that is. And I'll leave it at that. You can. I'm sure you'll find something on your guys' site about it. But the point being is, what ended up happening is this is kind of the Eve DS1. You know, these are the pedals that Joe would have been using back in the day. And what ended up happening is because you know, you can't get some of those parts, you can't manufacture some of those parts. This is the new version. So this is a Keeley pedal that I own. And so what Robert is doing is basically making the new DS1 sound like the old DS1, which is really supposed to sound like the preamp part of an amplifier. And then all sorts of other people started making other versions of this and other versions of this. And then, you know, you've got the original Tube Screamer, you've got the 30th anniversary, you've got Analog Mike, who's, you know, probably the biggest expert on Tube Screamers ever. That's where I learned everything I know about Tube Screamers, is his site. So the point being is, you've got all these pedals that are really imitating and do a great job. I own all these pedals, I bought them, I paid a small fortune for them. And you got this whole world of guys that started using pedals to try and imitate something that's now actually available in amplifiers. We've just gotten really dependent on using pedals. Now, that's not to say that a great signal chain does not depend on a pedal, that's not what I'm saying. But what the VT1000 allows players to do now is actually go, okay, well, I had 3 tubes. I had 2 tubes in my drawer. And basically what I did was like, well, okay, let me stick these tubes in here. I had a groove tube. I have a Mullard, and down there on the floor, thank you, Rebecca, appreciate it, is an electro-harmonic. So the deal is, like pedals, even if these were the same, basically, these are 12AX7s, without knowing anything about the gain, I can almost already know that they're going to sound different. Every tube manufacturer does things ever so slightly different. Some of them buy other people's tubes and put their name on them, which means that that tube is potentially going to sound different from year to year depending on who they get their stock from. Which, if you liken these to distortion pedals, you begin to go, there's a lot of variation in there. The challenge is, you're going to see some little numbers that I've written on here. So this guy is a 7. This guy is an 8-9. And this one is a 7-8. And the beauty of this unit is basically you stick the tube in, you turn it on, you select the type, and once you've measured one type of tube, if you're staying on the same type of tube, when you take the one out, you put the next tube in, it knows that you're trying to, it presumes you're measuring the same type of tube. So within about literally all of 10 minutes between writing it down, I actually knew a lot about these tubes that I knew nothing about other than that they were the same type of tube, 12AX7. But basically what you got is some very, very valuable information that's the equivalent of going, okay, for the first song or for this band, I want the pedal there. For this band, I want it there, and for that band, I want it there. And where this gets to be fun for those of us that are serious pedal geeks or gear geeks, is you begin to go, okay, well, wait a second. So these just have different values. The difference about a tube versus an actual pedal is these are three-dimensional, where you play hard or you play soft, and I showed you earlier, you know, these are all things that I
Fine.
regularly use because I'm constantly manipulating the transients of what's going into an amplifier because I spend a lot of time in the studio tracking gear. So a microphone is basically right there in the face of the speaker, hearing things in a way that our human ear does not hear things. So the attack becomes very important. The thing that's great about a tube is it has some natural compression going on in the circuit. So it responds to your hand. So it compresses a little bit, but it also overdrives a little bit, but it also has distortion. And it's all doing these things simultaneously as it relates to your touch in a way that a pedal doesn't. So what's happening is you're playing, all of a sudden the nuance of the brand and the nuance of the value, and then these guys, this guy right here is the perfect 7. So it basically means both sides of the tube are perfectly balanced. This guy has a 7, this is the 8-9 rather, which means it's hotter, it's got more gain to it, and it's very close to being balanced both sides, so it's a perfectly fine tube. But then you get up to your 8-9 here, excuse me, your 7-8 and your 8-9. If I'm looking for the most gain, I'm going to take the hottest tube. And what it means then I can start to experiment with tubes, and this guy in the US is $4.99, so it's actually less than I paid for my vintage tube screamer. But again, this is the imitation of the things that go on in your amplifier. This enables you in your preamp side to take some very specific measurements on a scale of 1 to 15, which is a huge amount of range to be able to go. Basically, most pedals are kind of like 1 to 10. As it gets to power amps, there are a couple of other considerations which we're going to switch into power amp gear for a second. So this right here is the orange OV4, and we just made it available. It's a self-fit kit, which means in about a half an hour you can install it yourself, and it comes with either 4 or 2 sockets for your 50 or 100 watt fixed bias amplifiers. And this harness right here, what's really cool is classically, as many of your readers know, the 6V6 is synonymous with the American sound. The EL34 is synonymous with the British sound. With this setup here, I basically was able to harness the American quality and the British quality in one setup. But there are also some other very cool things. I'm not going to go crazy in depth on this other than to say, you can associate with the functionality on here. There's a share the wear function that in combination with this foot switch basically enables me to run a 100 watt fixed bias amplifier in 50 watt modes where you're accessing either the inner set of tubes or the outer set of tubes. Now with a little bit of magic from our buddies at Radial, this switch can actually gain multiple functions. So I can actually switch channels. That is to say, I can go between my dirty and clean channel, and I can switch tubes on the channels. So basically what I'm saying is that on your clean channel, you can have your 6V6s for your American sound, and your dirty channel, you can have the EL34s. And what's great about the OV4 self-fit kit is that without having to use any of the included Mac or PC compliant software, you're able to, out of the gate, swap tubes on the fly, mix and match them, because it basically already has some preset bias values. But with these custom, the standard and custom bias what that enables you to do is you don't, if you go in and create some custom bias points in the software, which is, you don't have to be like a rocket tube genius to do it. There's a pull down menu where it kind of has different types of tubes, and then you're able to just kind of have a selected range so you don't do something stupid, and it gives you a bias point range, and then you're able to create a custom set or the standard set. So basically what it means is that if you just want to be able to hot swap tubes all over the place, you probably want to leave it in the standard set. And then if you want to create a custom bias point for a specific set of tubes, or literally have 4 different tubes in each of the 4 different sockets, that's where you go into the custom mode. And then again, with the foot switching capacity, it's total control over the same things that we do. And this is the genius of this. At least I am a little biased, I must admit. But the point being is, you're able to leverage the same thing that we do with our pedals and our pedals boards, where we use a specific pedal for a certain color, we use a certain type of distortion pedal for our distorted sounds, we use a certain overdrive pedal for our overdriven sounds, we toggle between the two of them, maybe we stack them, and basically what we're really doing is imitating what's happening in a high-end cascading gain stage amplifier. We're doing it with our pedals. It's very logical how we got there. But 30 years later, we're kind of hooked on pedal crack. And as much as I'm obviously, I've spent plenty of time surfing the web. You know, I've got like 400 pedals. It was 300 this morning. It's growing. Yeah, no, it's crazy. But you know, because I appreciate that, especially when you add it in the front end of a tube circuit, it does something very unique in the way it interacts with the tubes, and that's why, you know, pedals, I'm a huge fan. Now, there are a couple of things about this unit that I want to just briefly kind of go slightly, I don't know, I hate to use the word salesy, but it's important information because I know Premier Guitar has a number of people that are in the manufacturing side of things. Basically what this enables a manufacturer to do is take your preamp tubes and your power amp tubes and test them to a very specific standard, literally again on a range from 1 to 10. With power amp tubes, in case you didn't know this, power amp tubes generally are grouped into 3 different types of tubes. The first one is early distortion, then there's average, and then there's late distortion. Basically in your kind of lower wattage amps where you want it to kind of be warm and break up earlier, use early distortion. On your kind of middle ones, you use average distortion. On a higher gain amplifier where you're using the cascading gain in the preamp, you do not want that much power amp distortion until you kind of get to a concert volume where I want a little bit of that. It's the same way, you know, you maybe stack just a little bit of distortion pedal and just a little bit of tube screamer. It just kind of adds that little bit of like, oh, there it is, when you just want to step on that. So the point being is that what you're able to do on a manufacturing level is come up with exact, very specific ranges of these. And what's beautiful about it, literally, you plug in the tube, you turn it on, you select the type, and you press run. So basically it means you can go through a giant set of tubes, you can sort them into very specific ranges for very specific amplifiers, you can write on them with a pen, you know exactly what they are. That means that off the production line, your amps are 100% consistent, which means that the distributor, they're 100% consistent, which means at the point of retail, the player is going to have an opportunity to play an amp that sounds just the same in the store as the one that they order online. That is really important. Now, but it doesn't stop there. As a player, you have the perfect moment. You're like, your eyes are closed, you're at the lip of the stage, it's that night where everything was perfect. And you're like, okay, I need to document where my settings are. Well, traditionally we haven't been able to access the tubes in our amp and go, I need to measure this, I need to know how I'm going to recreate this, because if you've ever had a session or something where you've got a preamp tube in there and you got this tone dialed up and all of a sudden you hear, and then 2 minutes later, and you realize the thing's just about to die, you have to replace it, it's going to change the tone. So the point being is that, you know, when you're dealing with guys that are really professional players, they have very specific tubes that they're putting in there or their tech is putting in there. So this is something that every player should and could be doing, or maybe could and should be doing, which was actually going, hey, this is the preamp tube that was the perfect tube for that night, or it got me really close, now I want to go a little hotter, or knowing that the different manufacturers, the color, if you will, of those tubes is going to be a little bit different from manufacturer to manufacturer. Once you've made the initial investment, which is less than my vintage tube screamer, then you can actually really do the things, you know, Eric Johnson's like, oh, I tried this pedal, but you know, no, I had to try 100 till I found the perfect one. Well, he's a guy that is so sensitive to the architecture of those circuits, he can hear the difference. More importantly, he can feel the difference. But if we were to actually do the same, take his favorite tubes out of there, measure them, and then replicate those tubes based on those measurements, he would have the exact same experience and we could replicate that experience. And this is for the player is why it's so valuable, is you can go, hey, it was really close, now I'm going to fine tune it, I'm going to get everything in my circuit, my preamp gain, how early average or late my power amp gain is going to be, and I can craft the amp exactly as I want. It's leveraging technology around the things that we love, really in a way that we're used to doing it. And again, we're used to swapping pedals on our pedal board. Now we can roll tubes in our amplifier.
Well, that is very cool. If people want to learn more than you just told them about this, where can they go online?
They can definitely go to orangeamps.com, and we've just made a video that kind of says a lot of that, but I'm sure there's some things that I added and there's some things that I forgot. And you know what, we're a company that we can be reached. Don't be afraid to reach out. It's like the great thing about Orange is that some of our best ideas have come from our forums, where people are like, hey, you kind of got it right here, but you kind of missed it. And then we're like, we need the feedback so we can know what the end user is wanting or needing. And then in that sense, we can begin to get to that next place. Thanks so much. Orangeamps.com.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. And if you want to learn more about this, you go to orangeamps.com. If you want to watch more of our NAMM videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel or head to premierguitar.com.